Alright guys, so those of you who watched my last video will know that I was having some problems with my airbrush after cleaning it, in that I didn't solve the sticky trigger problem. Well, I went out and just bought some oil, machine oil, put a tiny bit on the trigger mechanism, solved the problem, so now I've got a perfectly functional trigger. But I've noticed that my airbrush doesn't seem to be outputting at the pressure that the regulator on my compressor says it's outputting at. So that to me doesn't sound or feel like the 45 psi it's set on at the moment. I'm not sure why that is, so if anyone would know, if anyone has any ideas what this could be, that'd be greatly appreciated. But I will basically I've just turned the pressure up a hell of a lot more on the compressor side to sort of account for it. So I'm hoping that this will do the trick, but I would hate to have to. If there's a problem with my airbrush or the compressor, I'm not sure. So if anyone knows why that might be happening, that'd be good if you could let me know. But I'll persevere on. So I wanted to do a paint video today, and as you can see, I've already primed these two tank chassis. So yeah, you'll know I've got a new turret off Hawk Wargames customer support, which is nice. So at the moment, the next step, because I didn't feel like it was worth really recording the priming part, is to do the same thing I did last time with the acrylic ink. There you go, acrylic artist ink. This is black acrylic ink and matte medium, like so. So the matte medium will dull the shine from the ink, because it tends to be very shiny if you sort of just use it as it is. And I'm going to use this to pre-shade around the tank as best as I can. I'm pretty much doing a 50-50 mix of ink to matte medium. Pretty much just making it up. We'll see how it goes, if it needs to be changed as I spray. So I'm just mixing these colours in my colour cup at the moment. Alright. Seems okay, so let's try and do this in such a way that you can actually see. So I've changed the camera position again, so I'm having to sort of airbrush over the top. So you really don't have to be neat about this at all. The idea is to just get a rough shading around panel lines. I think the effect works really nice. So that for those that have seen the drop ships, should probably agree with. Now the reason I use ink instead of black paint is that the ink flows a lot nicer, so I'm only really pulling back that trigger such a tiny amount before that. If I go full whack on this, it'll completely spiderweb all over the model. So the reason I'm using ink instead of paint is that, you know, ink flows a lot easier. If I use paint, I will have to pull all the way back, and you don't get as much control. And I just basically, whenever I've tried to do this with paint, it hasn't gone so well. See, I'm not really trying to be too neat here. I'm just trying to suggest some shadows or shading even. You really do not have to be neat at all. So this is a technique that is used mainly on larger models, like aircraft when you want to shade between the panels, but as you can see it works rather well on this, so there you go, that's one. Try and get through this one a bit quicker. The great thing is about this, because you don't have to be neat, you can really, you know, make a lot of mistakes at this point. But you'll still end up with a nice effect at the end of the day. It's very forgiving. And if you do really mess it up, you can always just spray the next coat on top heavily enough that you just don't see any of this. There you go. Finally the turrets for each one, so just going to spray around there. In a way this is more of a suggestion of shading, it doesn't have to be very neat. See? Messy but lovely and awesome. Right then, let's make sure that's dry. Probably added a bit too much paint there, can you see? It's a shame. I'm just going to spray this out. Right, colour change. So I'm just going to put in some isopropyl alcohol into the colour cup, swirl it around with my skanky mixing brush. There it is. Just to loosen up any dry paint in here and get rid of it. Ready for the next colour. Another thing I like to do as well, just get this circular cotton bud at the end, pull the needle back, insert the cotton bud into the front, give it a swirl, just pick up any paint on the end. Helps to just clean the nozzle out a bit, that does. Alright. Ready for the next colour. So, following on from the dropship recipe that I came up with, it's gonna be sand yellow, model air. This doesn't need to be thin, this is just gonna go straight into the airbrush. And apply it to the model. So, let's pick you. There we go. So I'm lightly dusting it on at the moment, just getting an initial coat. Not too wet. Just let that dry off. See, with these small parts here, I'm probably going to have to sort of airbrush one side to completion nearly, and then swap over so I can get the end of the barrel. Get the underside. these look like to be probably the simplest ones to paint out of this set. Not sure, but I don't even think this has any sort of actually, well, yeah, it does. There's a few lights on the front that need detailing, but it's a lot smaller than, say, the dropship model. So that's why I'm recording this one in real time and doing both rather than with the dropships when I sped it up. Besides, when I look for painting tutorials on YouTube, so I like to just keep an eye out for things like that. I tend to like the ones that really go in depth and just show you the whole thing, mistakes and all, because I think you learn a lot more that way. Either learn or someone watching it can help you out. Which is what I'm hoping. So it could just be me, but I'm just convinced that my airbrush pressure just isn't that high, and I don't know, perhaps temperature might have something to do with it. It's pretty warm these days, but I've never seen this before. So yeah, sort of coming on nicely. This, you might think that, you know, you've completely obliterated all that nice pre-shading you did, but you know, really you shouldn't worry. It'll, as the acrylic paint dries, it'll come straight back. You have to try quite hard to actually just completely obliterate any of that shading, especially when using light coloured paints like this, which really don't have the same coverage that you'd expect, you know, a darker paint to have. Oh, sorry. Actually got a glove on this time. I was priming without one and I just covered my hand in grey paint, and I just figured, you know what, I'll actually wear the protective gear this time. So this is just the shading part here. We've done a pre-shade. This is the shade, and then we'll do a post-shade to lighten it up. As you can see, if you grab one of these, see, that's a lot brighter than those tanks, isn't it? So that's because of the post-shade we're going to do after this, which just adds a bit more contrast between the panels. And lightens up the overall model. So I was debating whether I'd even do the pre-shade on these. They're such small ones. I didn't know how well it would work really. It seems to be okay. Also, for those interested, I've bought some white spirit, so I will try the oil wash using white spirit rather than the odorless turpentine, which is what I was using before, and we'll see how that comes out, see if it works a bit better. Although, to be honest, I was pretty happy with the way the oil wash performed on the dropships. It's always worth experimenting. Right, I am pretty happy with this. It doesn't have to be too neat. These are tanks after all. They're going to be a bit grubby and a bit mottled, I guess. And the oil washes and what have you should take care of any patchy areas. Alright, just get rid of this paint. Right, I'm not even going to bother cleaning out that colour because, actually, I'll tell you what I will do. I will clean the nozzle though. But I wasn't going to change the colour because, you know, we're using a colour now that's so like the original, just a tiny bit lighter, that you really don't even have to bother with a colour change. But I will just clean the nozzle. Be careful when you do this if you have an airbrush, because you might bend your needle if you're not careful, and you don't want that. My needle's a tiny bit bent on the end, and it does affect the spray pattern a bit. Now I'm just using a Valero's Airbrush paint thinner, Model Air thinner, along with the this next colour, because it's a game colour one, so it's thicker than the and not pre-thinned. We're going to be using Bone White, an awesome colour everyone should have, or should have an equivalent. Doing 2 parts paint to 4 parts thinner, thereabouts. Last time I think I made it too thin, far too thin. I was having problems trying to spray it, but this should work better, and if not, oh well. I'll correct the mix and make it a bit thicker. Right then, let's see how this goes. Let's grab a tank. I'm being very gentle with this. I can see that can you see the shine there? That's, you know, you want to leave it, you want to dry that back with some air before you spray on it again. You know, you've got to do this in layers as well. The lightness will come through eventually. I'm just trying to spray within the panel lines, but to be honest, it's not that big a deal. A lot of this is going to end up becoming silver. Like these grills, as long as that front part is overall the right colour, I think, and these side parts, it should sort of give you the impression that it's a lighter colour overall. Oh, nearly sprayed too much then. If you can, when you're airbrushing like this, try and position it so you're actually seeing the reflection of the light in the paint, so you know when you've, you know, because if you have it angled in a certain way where you can't see the wetness build up, you might sort of inadvertently get the spider webs and stuff without realizing. If you can sort of actually see the dampness of the paint as it goes on the part, then that could help you make sure you don't make that mistake. Oh, went a bit heavy there. Whoops. You probably noticed I haven't gone back and filled in that line there, that gap. Although to be honest, just with the super glue and sanding, it's quite, you know, it's not massively noticeable. I mean, it's a bit better on this one, as you can see. So you can sort of get away with it. It's not. I don't think it's a big deal. If you're a bit of a perfectionist and you really want to give these minis your all. See, it's looking really nice. Now over the turrets. So I'm not really worrying where the paint's going on this. So I'm just sort of trying to catch a bit of highlight around the edge of these sort of round sections. I'm also hitting the barrel. Now, I'm thinking, I'm just going to dust the whole top of the miniature with this paint just to sort of brighten it up a bit overall. There we go. I'm pretty happy with that. That's the right sort of scheme. Looking at my dropships, they now have the same sort of scheme on the go. Maybe that needs a little just brightening up a bit. There we go. Right then. Still got quite a bit of paint left. Just get rid of that now. There we go. Now I do need to clean out the colour cup this time, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this dry and apply a varnish, so that this lovely paint job here is protected from all the subsequent steps. So the next step after varnish it I'm going to do is paint the silver parts. Which shouldn't take too long. There's well, actually, there's these big grills. There's also the track. So I'll probably end up painting the tracks a different metal colour, like a much darker one, a gunmetal colour, I think. Right, should be clean enough to go. I just need these parts to be totally dry, so alright, so I'm just going to put some gloss varnish in the airbrush, give it a spray, and then I'll skip ahead when they're ready to be silvered up. I'm going to have to look at the box art as well, just to check painting the right parts. It's going to be tricky because obviously I can only touch certain parts of the model. I'm going to try and dry this off a bit. So I'm going to put it back down carefully. Really doesn't need much. A bit heavy there at the front. Right, there we go. So I'll leave that to dry and I'll skip ahead until the silver bits are ready. Alright, time to do the silver. So I'm using Model Air Chrome again, so I don't need to thin this or anything, and it has excellent coverage, so I don't even have to paint black on the parts that are going to be silver first. I also had a brief look on the Hawk Wargames website to see the studio paint scheme, and actually there's a lot more silver on these than I thought. Lots of little details that need to be picked out, so we'll see how we get on. So it's things like, you know, these little raised bits, they all need to be silver. And there's quite a few. Now you can see I've made a few mistakes already. But not to worry, because that's the whole point in putting that gloss coat on is so we can pretty much just get rid of them without trying. So afterwards I'll go back with a tiny bit of isopropyl alcohol and just basically correct any mistakes, just get rid of them basically by brushing it over them. But there is a lot of little details on this. So I could be wrong in saying that this was easier than the dropship, because it might not be, if you take into account the fact you've got to go around picking out all these little greebles and what have you. I mean, you don't have to do this, obviously. It's your miniatures, paint them how you want, but I've already committed to paint them like the studio scheme. Oops. That's the trick of using the side of your brush. Sometimes get it all over the place.
So I may just do this one on camera and then I'll do the other one off camera.
Well, these parts will look a lot better when you get the oil wash on. It'll help make them pop and distinguishable from the rest of the surface. Whew, nearly there. I'm thinking you could easily get away with not doing any of these little tiny ones and still sort of, you know, keep the rest and it'll look like the studio scheme, I'm sure. Because this is very tricky to paint.
Right.
Said I'm not worried about any mistakes because they'll be easy to fix. Seeing as we put that nice gloss coat down, we can pretty much just probably carefully scratch off with a cocktail stick or use isopropyl alcohol on the tip of your brush and just brush the fending paint away.
Very easy.
Now the tracks on these are black on the studio scheme. Ooh, so that's what I'm going to end up doing. Although I'm not going to use black, I'm going to use a black grey, which is near black but not quite there. It just means you can put that down and then use a black wash on top, or black oil wash, or Bada Black or something like that, and it'll still shade it. Should look good. Now, just giving it a quick once over just to check that I've hit all the major points. Then onto the turret.
I'm gonna do this whole back section here. Now hopefully when these are finished, this starter army, I know it's taking me some time, but got a lot going on.
I've got work and a lot going on outside of work as well, so but by the time hopefully when I finish these, I'll have them up on eBay and hopefully it'll make enough money that I can buy another set. 'Cause I'm thinking what I'd really like to do is get the Scourge starter set, because I think they've got a really interesting paint scheme. I think they're actually going to be one of the easiest to paint. Oh, as in to paint easily but still look good. Again, that'll be just for sort of tutorial purposes, you know, for your benefit, and then I'll sell them for my benefit. hope you guys can see this.
I haven't really been keeping an eye on the footage I'm capturing. Right. This whole mechanical section here needs to be silver. I really do like the Valera Model Air metallics. They have such good coverage, and they just look really smooth and metallic, not glittery. And they have excellent coverage. Right. There's an antenna looking thingy on the side of this bulge on the side of the turret. Oh. Maybe just out of the way. I do apologise if the camera's been focusing on the table and not what I'm doing. The parts I'm trying to paint are really delicate. And it's tricky enough trying to get this in focus. Don't think you're really going to see underneath the tank turret, but whilst I'm here I might as well put something down. Right. Trying to paint these bands around the barrel. It's a bit easier to do if you use the side of your brush. Just like when you're doing edge highlighting. I've made a few mistakes there, but that's fine. Finally, just paint the end of this barrel. Right. I don't think I've missed anything, but what I'll do is I will go around, fix any errors that I've made. Yeah, check that out, it's cool, isn't it? One thing I've got to be careful though is that paint is going to rub and it's probably going to come off. Now one thing I could do to fix that is try and lubricate that joint using graphite from a pencil. So yeah, if you just sort of draw around the pin, graphite's like a dry lubricant, so and it kind of looks cool because it'll give it that dark gunmetal effect. So that's what I'll end up doing to
hopefully so that you don't end up scraping all the paint off when you move the barrel, but then again it's only going to scrape off from underneath where you're not really going to see it. There you go, looks cool, doesn't it? So yeah, I'll skip ahead when I've painted the other tank and turret and fixed all the mistakes. Right, as you can see, I've cleaned up the silver parts and then took the liberty to paint the tracks using the black grey Valero model colour paint. And I also applied a very heavy Bada black wash inside here, the tyres, basically to mask a lot of the like mistakes from trying to paint between the wheels, and to just darken and grime those sections up. I haven't done it on that side, the inside. I mean, I could come back later and do it there, but to be honest, I don't think it's really necessary. At the bottom, you're not really going to see it anyway. So at some point, when I do I'm going to do a dry brush of silver on this to pick out the treads. But for now, I've applied a varnish as well. So they're everything's ready for an oil wash. Now I haven't got any foil left, unfortunately. I've just found out, so I'm just going to use a bottle lid here. Now I'm going to try the white spirits this time, rather than odorless turpentine. We'll see how we get on. Right then. Probably, hopefully should work quite well. Right, where's my oil paints? So, I'm using 2 oil paints, a black one and a brown one. There we go, this is a basic earth, black. I also bought some cheap nylon brushes to do this rather than using an old watercolour one, because I think this will work better. Ooh. There's the brown part. I am literally guessing this. Just guessed, I mean. This black one's being tough to open. There we go. Now I'm not sure if this is enough, but we'll see. I just want a sort of browny black colour, to be honest, so it doesn't really matter how, if I get the colour exact. Now I'm just looking at how this is reacting with the actual shapes on the lid. That might do the trick. We'll soon see when I try it on the model. Right. Pretty much just slapping this all over the surface because there's a lot of surface detail that needs to be highlighted. So far so good. This should clean up nicely afterwards as well. See, anyone who hasn't tried oil washes and instead, swears by the GW washes should give it a go, because you can get very fine and precise lines with an oil wash, and it's very forgiving because you can clean it up very easily as well. Although it does help if you have an airbrush, because the airbrush really helps you get a nice even gloss coat down, so that the to prep the model for it, because you really need that so that you can correct any mistakes. But even so, those kind of washes, GW washes, still have its place. So as I said, I've used it on the treads. They're just not as easy to control. And one tube of oil paint will last you forever if this is all you're using it for as well. Although I do recommend getting the type of oil paint that I've got here. Hang on. It's a bit tricky to pronounce. The Optilong 502. This is made for modelling. So the pigment in it is very fine, and you do not get graininess when you thin it down with the alcohol. Artists' oils, especially cheap ones, you'll find that when you try and do this, you'll see little bits, and it's grainy and doesn't. This stuff is designed specifically for what I'm doing, applying it as a wash. So it's better mind. Right, I'm gonna have to carefully hold this to try and get the side done. It doesn't really matter much if I get it in the treads, that's already pretty shaded, thanks to the better black wash. There you go, that looks better already. Just get the front as well. Whilst we're at it, we'll get in the back here. Right. Please excuse the fact that the webcam isn't focusing on this piece. Just getting distracted by them, I think. But you get the general idea. Well, so far so good. The white spirits has really done the trick. Now the problem is, now you have to play the waiting game to get this oil paint to dry enough that you can handle the miniature and clean up. There we go, there we have it. Right, after this is basically dried off, we'll be cleaning it up using white spirits again on a cotton bud or something like that, just going over carefully, wiping it off where we don't want it, not to rub too hard, because if we do, we'll accidentally lift off the gloss varnishes that we've done and ruin the underlying paint job, which isn't what we want. And then after that, it's a case of applying a matte varnish to seal the oil in, and picking out details, doing a silver dry brush, and maybe another varnish on top of all of that, and it's done. See, it's pretty easy. I mean, I've done this on and off throughout the day whilst doing other things. I'll leave this to the side in case I need it. That'll stay like that for a while, and I can always add a bit more white spirits if it gets a bit if it evaporates a bit. Right. I think I'll skip ahead here. Right. Let's see if we can clean these up now. They've been drying for a bit. Let's get some more of the white spirits. Right then. Combat. You see, it comes right off. Now you might need a few cotton buds. You're gonna be going through them because they get clogged up very easy, and you'll just start moving the oil around rather than wiping it off. I'm not trying too hard to get this really clean because it's a tank after all, so some of this will look like, make it look a bit weathered, a bit worn. There you go. Compare that to the other one. You can pretty much leave, I mean, I've left this for about an hour, but you can leave this over days and come back and you can still be able to do this. So you're really not under pressure at all. So very forgiving. Right, there you go. Just need to clean up the turret a bit. we go. So what I would tend to do now is leave this to dry a bit more, especially, for example, inside the top of this turret. It's a bit wet still. You know, sometimes I'd leave this overnight to completely go off, and before varnishing it all and then detailing out. So the details would be the little lights on it, the dry brushing the tracks with metal, and sealing everything down. But it's getting late here, so I'm gonna call it a day, and hopefully you can you'll be able to appreciate what these will come to look like. That's pretty much it. Very simple, very easy to do. Anyone who's got an airbrush, even if you haven't, you can do this with a brush, and it's, you know, it's very simple. They come out really nice. See, I think I'll leave it there. As I said, there's only a couple of lights to paint, and then the metallic, you know, effect on the treads, and that's pretty much it. So until next time, guys, take it easy. Bye bye.